So today I wanted to talk about something that has been on my mind on and off throughout the years, which is the whole topic of solo content. This especially came up recently with Beastmaster, but even in my last stream, someone mentioned solo instances. So I figured why not make a dedicated thing regarding this. Because I do feel it's a fun topic to discuss because of course MMOs, MMO stands for Massive Multiplayer Online RPG, right? Emphasis on multiplayer. Do these games need solo content? So that's gonna be the main question. I'm just gonna get straight into the first part of this topic, which is fundamentally the question: do we need solo content? What do you think, Andy?
I actually think we do need solo instances, like solo duties. I think they are necessary for the MSQ because you want to otherwise there's no other way of driving the narrative of the main story.
What do you mean? Like, can't you do it can't you do it with a dungeon or a trial as well?
Well, the problem is, in my opinion, that with a dungeon and a trial, it takes with a trial you probably can more easily because you can just make really cool mechanics that really reinforces the narrative with the trial. But with the dungeon, I think you're more likely that you're gonna get distracted by the other players in the dungeon. So you don't really get or even get distracted by the NPCs maybe. Like maybe the NPCs, like if you're doing a duty support, right? Then even then, I don't know. I just feel like a lot of times the dungeons they don't reinforce the narrative too well, in my opinion. There are of course some exceptions. Some dungeons are really good at it, but the vast majority of times the dungeons they kind of feel like filler, in my opinion.
Would you say
I think
your argument for why we need solo content is for the story, essentially, is what you're saying? For the narrative?
Yes. But I don't think we need. I gotta be honest. In my humble opinion, I don't think we need solo content for the in the open world. What I think what we need more of is content that requires you to be in social contact with other players, because that's something that's been missing. And this is not a problem exclusive to FF14. So many MMOs in general have this problem. World of Warcraft has this problem as well, where it has so much content that you just can do alone and not talk to a single soul. And then one time you need another person, you just queue up and you don't talk to them, and they just do their rotation and that's it, and then they leave. This is why I think people got really upset that Fork Tower was so fucking unbearable as it was. Fork Tower actually requires you to do the MMO aspect of the game, but you didn't get rewarded for it. You just got punished for it with losing time, like wasting your time, basically.
It's interesting because in this expansion we do have two implementations of this large scale content. So of course we had Chaotic at the beginning of the expansion, and then we had the Fork Tower, which, as we know, was absolute disaster. So
yeah,
I think this is a good point, and I noticed this in my responses to the Chaotic video. There were a lot of comments, there were a lot of people who really hated what I had to say on the Chaotic, because my okay, let me backtrack. So you were basically saying that there is too much solo, or you can get too. Let me think how to use the English language. You can get by too easily without contacting or being in interaction with other players. And I definitely felt this with the feedback or the comments I got on my Chaotic video, because one of my stances was that I felt people were way exaggerating how difficult it actually was to gather 24 players. And my argument was basically that if you go PF something, you don't need to commit to anything. You can do it on your own time. So that's the positive. But it's a double-edged sword, because then the negative is that the price for the lack of commitment is essentially almost guaranteed a worse experience, especially in the West, where, you know, people, for example, they cheat. Sorry, not cheat. Well, they do that too, but like they lie with their progress a lot, or people rage quit after one pool, things like that. I got a lot of hate for that because people say like, "Oh, are you seriously suggesting that we should make our own static and get 23 other people? How is that possible?" And I was like, guys, this is basic networking skills. I don't know, I feel like people don't have it these days. Like, I mentioned a few in the video. For example, back when I started raiding in this game in 2017, this was like a no-brainer for a lot of people, that if you met a solid player in PF, like a consistent player, didn't fail the mechanics that much, etc., was patient, you know, stayed in the party, you would typically add them, you know, to your friend list. Maybe you would also add them on like Discord or something. Through them, you would get to know other players as well who were consistent and so on. It kind of builds on itself. Conversely, if you had someone who was who did some of this behavior, for example, clearly lying about their prog or something like this, you just blacklist them basically, so you never come across them again. And I feel like people these days, I hate to, it sounds so elitist, but it feels like, yeah, this networking ineptitude, almost you could call it. People feel it's maybe too toxic to blacklist someone, so they don't do it. Or they feel it's too much effort to send someone a message of like, hey, can we play again? Or there was actually a guy in the
being shy is also a thing. People are more shy, so they don't want to interact with other players, which ironically enough, they play an MMO. So like, it's a kind of a paradox, right? Is that they're playing an MMO, but they don't want to talk to other people.
Yeah.
It doesn't quite add up, you know?
Yeah, so I feel like there has been too much of a push to like, oh, you have to be able to just PF everything and not commit to anything. Of course, it's a good thing that PF exists, and, you know, you can, because the reality is that a lot of people are very busy. Although I do argue that even if you are very busy, like for example, I'm an extremely busy person, even I can still run a static, even a 24-man static, but you know, it's not for everyone to have like a static schedule. I understand that, you know, maybe you have a chaotic work schedule, maybe you work like these really 8 shift hours.
Yeah.
Well, as a previous shift worker, a four-way shift worker, I can relate to it. But yes, I do get the sense that people are just not that good at this socializing element anymore, and I do feel like part of the reason is precisely this push for like that you need to be able to do everything without any commitment. And in my opinion, I feel like the chaotic raid got undeserved hate, because in my opinion that wasn't the developers' issue, right? That was the community's problem, in my opinion.
Yeah.
That's just me though. But I don't want to rehash too many of the things, because, you know, if you're interested, you can go watch that video and you can see people's comments and what they felt. But yes, to me this is just common sense. You know, if you do PFing, for example, you can try to increase your odds by networking with the consistent players and avoiding the problematic ones, instead of just rolling the dice every time you go in. In my opinion, that makes more sense. Like, do you remember back in the days, you know, it was pretty normal that you would pug and you would join like a Discord channel, for example. Like, that was pretty normal back in the days. I don't think people do that.
I remember people like were demanding it. Like, they
Yeah.
wouldn't let you play with them if you didn't.
Yeah, exactly. And then you would join those Discord servers and you would find other people, like-minded people. And yeah, so it was pretty smooth. I don't know, maybe I'm just a boomer. Like a boomer raider who thinks
No,
like,
I
oh,
will
you know, it was
I will
better
say
before.
like I will say that I don't think the whole thing about joining Discord servers and stuff was as common as we might think.
Maybe, yeah.
I think because I think that's specifically our social circle that was just really into that. Because I remember in Heaven's Ward there was also party finder, like the whole thing about party finders just being mute and not talking to each other or anything, like only chatting in text was also a thing in Heaven's Ward as well.
I have to honestly be really careful what I say because I risk coming across as like too much of like a toxic boomer, like an elitist boomer. I guess I would summarize it like this. One potential downside of too much solo content and allowing people to clear content without commitment to a group is, exactly as you said, they become worse at socializing, they become worse at networking, they become too comfortable. And that is one downside. Of course, it's not necessarily a bad thing to let players do content with less commitment. But we just have to be cognizant of, this downside when it comes to the player base.
I don't think it's the player base's fault entirely though, because you don't really get rewarded enough, in my opinion, for playing with other players. The only thing I can think of that rewards you a decent amount is the tombstone bonus thing. Otherwise, there's no like in-game mechanic that says like, oh, you get extra stuff if you play with other players.
But my counter to this is that, is it necessarily the job of the developer? Because isn't the reward the social experience itself in a way, if you know what I mean? Or maybe I misunderstand what you're saying here.
Oh, no, you understood it correctly. Like I do mean that like I don't think players get enough rewards in game for playing with other players, like material rewards, say gil for example, or an item or something like that, or more XP or something like that.
Are you talking about like open world content?
No, just in general.
But I'm not sure that applies because you get the bis gear from doing savage raids, which require 8 people. You can make a lot of money from doing treasure maps, which reward, for having more people because it goes faster. Even something like hunts, they're usually done by a lot of people.
Oh yeah, but I'd take it a step further and say that's not enough. Just doing it, getting the things you want faster, I don't think that's enough. People like, of course, you could say like, this is also partially people's fault because they have become like so passive nowadays. People have become so passive nowadays that like, they need even more incentive than before to get active.
I do feel like in this sense maybe I'm part of like some kind of older generation, or maybe I'm someone that is a lot easier to please. Because I myself simply don't see why the developers would need to like throw, these distractions and all these rewards at the players like constantly. Like, of course, you need some incentive. I'm not saying that. What would it look like in your opinion? Like rewarding players for playing in a group? How would you implement
one
that
thing
in
I can think of is that make free companies more functional.
I agree.
So that I think you should make free companies like more functional in the sense that they you get rewards for like playing together with free company people.
Yeah.
So maybe they like create like challenges or something, like weekly challenges that you can do that you have to do together with free company members. Like I don't know, like complete 10 dungeons this week by playing with free company members, or complete hunt marks with free company members, or something like that. Something as simple as that is the first step in the right direction, in my opinion.
I fully agree because it's kind of a massive angle that FCs in this game are basically completely useless. Like they don't do anything. Most people prefer to just have a Discord server because it basically does it well even better, honestly.
Yeah.
Besides, maybe you have an FC house. I guess that's like the main benefit.
Yeah, I think the big downside, free companies has kind of become like the same thing as World of Warcraft cesspool guilds, where like the free company only serves one purpose, and that is to make money through the submarines and the airships, and that's it.
So you'd like to see them integrate the free company system more.
I think that would be incredibly smart for them to do that. It would really incentivize people to play together more. And it's funny that I mentioned that because you know what game inspired me to this idea? It's actually Warframe, because Warframe recently added like an update where they you get extra resources every time you play with a clan member.
Okay.
Which is not very. It's not a very complicated system, but I think FF14 definitely has the opportunity to make it more interesting than just you get more XP or you get more gil. It's like who the fuck cares about getting more XP? I have every job at 100. Who the fuck cares about getting gil? I have fucking 70 million gil. I don't need more any gil.
But this makes for a nice bridge to the next topic, because I kind of wanted to talk about then the pros and cons of solo content, and I actually want to split it into from the developer's point of view and from the player's point of view. So actually this is kind of relevant to it. So if we talk about the pros and cons from the player's point of view, and we talk about, so we already talked about one con of solo content for the players, is that it makes them too comfortable to play without others. It reduces the social element and makes it more difficult to connect with others, right? So we already spoke about that. And now you brought up potential ways to remedy that. But the fundamental question is, do you think people would actually welcome such changes, or do you think there would be resistance to it?
I don't even think they would notice. Like people who doesn't care in the first place, they wouldn't care. They wouldn't care either way, in my opinion. People who do care, they will notice, in my opinion.
So you don't think there would be someone complaining like, damn you, Yoshida, why do you make me play with other players in an FC? I don't want to join an FC. I hate these dudes spamming FC links to me in Limsa. I don't want to join their stupid FC.
I mean, when was the last time you saw somebody in Limsa that has no FC tag?
Well, I just know I've been talking to people like from time to time in FF14 who refuse to join an FC for whatever reason. I'm honestly not sure. But
Okay,
they kind of like
I'm gonna say something a little bit judgmental now. Those people who say they refuse to join an FC is probably because they're causing problems in FCs all the time. Because they're always attracting drama.
Maybe, yeah.
That's at least my observation. Is that the vast majority of people who say they will never join an FC is because they are a drama magnet.
I see. I mean, that's fair enough. So we've mainly been focusing on the cons, but then of course for the benefits of solo content, I mean, it is very obvious. You can, in fact, you mentioned this at the very beginning, the narrative element, and Yoshida has indeed said this multiple times, that ever since I think Shadowbringers, they've made the deliberate efforts to make it so you can complete almost all of the MSQ completely by yourself. So that's obviously one benefit, because you don't, for example, have to deal with the long queue times every time you unlock a trial or a dungeon or whatever.
Yeah, that's a good thing.
So your POV is basically, you see the benefits of solo content as it pertains to the MSQ, to the story, but you don't think it has any merit in, like end game content.
No, I don't. Well, not entirely. Well, I can see it have some merit, but my problem with it is that it's still like it's counterintuitive to like the fact that it's supposed to be an MMO. I can talk about the merit that I think it has. The good thing about it is that it creates longevity for the game. Like the game will like, if the game becomes really unpopular at one point, you won't be at the mercy of like the community just not being willing to play with you. So you can still like play the game even after the servers have become like on life support mode. If that ever happens, that is one positive. Another positive is that it makes for way more approachable content.
Yeah.
Like it's a very you can just drop in, try it out, drop out, and you don't have to worry about too much about like any kind of like socials, strings attached or anything like that.
This was going to be one of my points in regards to the pros of solo content, and especially in regards to more end game content, because throughout the years, a few times I have brought up among players, the possibility of a hardcore solo boss, like a really difficult solo boss. And there's usually a lot of resistance to it from players, because I feel like a big part is simply because we've never seen it before. So people simply assume that it wouldn't work or it would fail. But I think one merit of having at least one difficult solo fight in the game would be that, and when I say difficult, I mean like ultimate level. Actually, maybe ultimate level is too difficult. Let's say around extreme savage level. It would give players an opportunity to try the end game, like more difficult content on a lower threshold, right? Like just go in and try, because a lot of people have anxiety around getting to, you know, extremes and savage, because they are worried that they're going to mess up and basically the embarrassment, right? Like it will cause that, so they could try it out first and use it as like a stepping stone to then do the 8-man difficult content.
Yeah.
But of course, I acknowledge that similar to as we spoke about with the cons, this could potentially backfire with some players, because then they would just do the solo fight, but then still feel too uncomfortable to do the fight with other players. So, and this actually brings us to the developer point of view, right? So what is the benefit of it for the developers? I feel like one benefit from the developer point of view is that, again, I'm not a developer, so for me it's hard to say. I don't mean to be like some armchair developer and say like, oh, you know, this is true, this is not. But I do feel as though it would be easier to make a solo fight. Because if you think about having a raid boss with 8 players, that means there are 8 times more interactions between the players and the boss. But if you only have a single player, that's very simple. You know, it's just an exchange between the boss and the player, so there are fewer interactions. So I do feel like actually from a developer point of view, it does make for easier content potentially. However, I brought this up here because of what you just said. Because the current raid design kind of does revolve around having more players. Because they've clearly made it so that, you know, if you think about a typical mechanic in Ultimate, for example, there's usually an element that if one person messes up, everyone blows up. So there's like, they call it body check, right? Basically.
Yeah.
Obviously, this doesn't work in solo content because you're the only player, so they would have to adjust their design philosophy a bit. I think the fun part of this video could be to discuss the specific instances of solo content in FF14, and then we can kind of break it down and see, you know, what we think about them and what could be done better and so on. The spiciest part of this discussion is, in my opinion, has to do with the solo instances. Indeed, someone brought it up last stream, and this is funny because this has been on my mind ever since the patch 5.3, when you fight the Sapphire weapon as the G Warrior. Ever since that fight, I've wanted to see extreme versions of solo duties. And I think that could be kind of cool. Especially, I feel like something like the Sapphire weapon fight, or even In From the Cold from Endwalker. The merit behind those is that, for example, when you pilot the G Warrior, everyone has the same kits. So that would immediately fix one potential problem, which would be that, imagine we made like an extreme version of, I don't know, the Xenos fight in Endwalker, which would be pretty badass, to be honest. But one major development hurdle there is that I said that you only need to make the fight for one player. But I feel like if you only have one player, the fight should definitely lean into like each of the roles. So then you would have to account for the player being a tank, a healer, a melee, and a ranged DPS. So that's caster. And potentially make like a slightly different version of the fight. But that wouldn't be an issue if it was, for example, the Sapphire weapon, because everyone has the same kit. So I feel like that would be a perfect, a trial. To trial is a poor word because we have trial fights in FF14. A good experiment.
Call it a showdown.
Yeah, a good experiment to try out this concept for the first time. So, what do you think? Do you think there could be like a harder version of solo instances?
I think that could, but the question is like, would it be worth it? Like, what would the carrot be other than the bragging rights?
I feel like in the case of the G Warrior fight, that would be obvious, right? You defeat the Sapphire weapon in extreme version, and you get the G Warrior as a mount. I think that would be pretty badass.
Oh yeah, that would be pretty cool.
That'd be awesome. So yeah, the main reason I'm saying this is because, in my opinion, it's just a damn shame that we have some really cool solo instances in this game, and they just really don't get utilized outside of the one story instance. I do feel like they could make for some combat content. They actually technically did do this once. Technically. Because if you remember the Bosnia storyline, you actually fight Varys first as a solo instance. And then you fight him in an extreme trial, though it is a normal 8-man extreme trial. But so that could be another way to do it. So maybe instead of fighting Sapphire weapon alone, you have a squad of 8 G warriors fighting the Sapphire weapon. Or you have an extreme trial of Xenos.
Would be cool.
Then again, they'll probably let's be honest, they'll probably reuse the Xenos fight in like an ultimate at some point, most likely. Then there is another piece of solo content I feel like was actually quite successful, in my opinion, personally, which were the duels in Bosnia.
Oh yeah.
I was really disappointed to see them not return in the what's that place called again? The Phantom place, the Crescent.
Yeah, the Crescent. The Crescent.
Because just a quick insider thing, like we usually just call it the Island Gacha because that's what the JP players were calling it when the when the tower came out. So yeah, that was definitely disappointing because I said this game doesn't have like proper difficult solo fights, but it is technically a bit wrong because those those duels actually were pretty difficult, especially if you did them properly, right? Because there was like a way to basically cheat them by using the flare star, and you just kind of nuke the boss in like 20 seconds. But if you did it, properly, and I don't know, I just have some fun memories of, for example, you fight the boss, and there's like 50 dudes watching you, and then you have all this pressure of like, don't do something stupid while half the server is watching you fight this guy. I feel like they should have brought that system back, but just make it better. Because I do feel like one downside of the Bosnia's duel system was that it was like a one and done thing, in my opinion. There should have been a system where instead of it selecting one guy, it selects 3 people total, let's say. And then each of you gets like an attempt at the boss, basically. So if the first guy fails, the next guy can try it. And then the third guy. However, if one of the people actually succeed, well, then the other guys don't get to do anything because you're done. But I feel like this could have solved one issue, which was it happened quite often that some dude just accepts the duel and doesn't know anything about the duel. For example, in a lot of them, you had to use something at the very beginning, right? You may have had to like dispel the boss, or you needed to use reflect or something. And it was really funny to see some dude just load in and die to the first thing because he didn't even bring like the prepared thing. Which I'm not blaming the player, by the way, because I mean, they probably didn't know you need that. But it was just kind of sad watching it because, that could have been I guess, like a real attempt by someone else. So I feel like the system could have been improved maybe a bit. So in that sense, I'm a bit disappointed they just completely axed it. And can I just say, my favorite duel was probably the one in the Loop Room. That one was super funny because you have a 48-man raid. And just think about it, this is so cool. You have a 48-man raid. 47 dudes fight one boss, while a single player fights a solo boss. And if they succeed, they get double damage. And, you know, you can like giga juice him up, right, with like dance partners and everything. However, if you fail on this duel, you just die and you cannot even be revived. So it was this really cool, like, high risk, high reward thing, you know, where I remember especially week 1 when we actually kind of needed that DPS because people were dying a lot on the bosses. So there was actually a lot of pressure on the guy, you know, doing the duel to first of all not mess up the duel, but also to not then die and, you know, do good damage during the fight. So I just really liked that. Because this is exactly what we were talking about with the whole, like, MMO and, like, social element with the duels. Because if it was in the zone, what would happen is, yes, you fight the boss solo yourself, but then the entire zone gets a bonus, like an XP bonus. And when it was in the Loop Room, again, it affected the whole group when you did do the duel. So in my opinion, that was a really good implementation. And again, I do miss them. I know not everyone was a fan of the duels, especially people who just wanted to get the mount. And they were like so angry they had to do the duels because the drop rate was pretty bad from like Castrum and so on. But I don't know, get good, I guess. No, I'm being facetious. Like, of course, yes, the system had some issues, but overall, I'm disappointed they didn't bring it back. Yeah, the duels were awesome, in a nutshell. Right, the next one is Deep Dungeon, right? So, you know, you can do the Deep Dungeons by yourself, and indeed there are titles and achievements for doing it. By yourself, of course, the most iconic is the Necromancer title for doing Palace of the Dead, all the way from 1 to 200 solo. Again, I do feel like this is a good implementation of solo content. You can go into these deep dungeons and they are designed to be a group activity. And it's really fun as a group. But then, yeah, if you wanna have an extra challenge, you know, you can do it fully by yourself. I don't think you have it, Andy, the Necromancer title.
No, I don't.
But maybe you've seen footage of it.
I have seen footage of it, yeah, of getting it. It's pretty intense sometimes.
One of the most thrilling experiences I've had in this game, in fact, is fighting the behemoth at 180 solo. Because it's kind of like, you know, if you mess up, you have to spend like 10 hours to get back to this behemoth. And it is such an intense moment, those last, is it 15% of his health or something? You know, when he starts spamming the meteor. And you have like this very small window to, you know, finish the behemoth or you get destroyed. And that was definitely a hype moment, you know, once you defeat the behemoth. So yeah, I do feel like those deep dungeons are also a good implementation of solo content. Because again, it actually incorporates exactly what you spoke about. Again, that there is a reward for doing it with more players. However, you can still choose to do it solo. So it's kind of ideal in that sense.
I mean, Palace of the Dead is a very good example of like how to do it right. It's also like a very, I think Palace of the Dead in general though is also very well designed.
Of course, the bane of, you know, everyone's like solo runs is of course the disconnects, and you know that does feel bad. You know, I still sometimes, you know, hear from people they're doing like floor 190 plus, and the server disconnects. Yeah, that is a big problem, and I kind of wish there was some system in place to help with that. I think there is actually, but I'm not completely sure. But yeah, of course, again, it's not perfect, but it does work for the most part. The next type of solo content is the Blue Mage Carnival. Well, actually kind of Blue Mage in general outside of the raids. And also the upcoming Beastmaster solo thing. I have to be honest here. These were kind of fun, like for the first time, especially the more like gimmicky, like puzzle element of like the carnival fights. But I did feel like there were a bit too much of like this just quick novelty. They didn't really leave an impression on me. I think the only one that properly left an impression, for some reason, I don't know why to be honest, I just remember fighting the Pepsi Man as a Blue Mage solo, which was really fun. I really enjoyed that fight. So I don't know why that stuck out to me. Maybe it's because it's Pepsi Man, bro. Maybe it's the PTSD.
Yeah.
But yeah, I don't know. I'm not a big fan. I'm not a big fan, to be honest, of the carnival, and that's why I was saying, like, in the video about the limited jobs, I don't have too many hopes for the Beastmaster, like, solo thing, because, I don't know, in my opinion, they don't have any longevity, right? You know, it's just this one fun gimmick you do once, and then you're done. I feel like the return on investment on, like, developer resources just isn't there, in my opinion, with those things. Actually, one of the comments I got on my limited job video was exactly that. They felt the carnival should have been multiple people rather than solo. And honestly, I do agree with that. I don't know why it had to be solo exactly. I guess that made it like kind of easier for the developers. Then we have the last type of solo content, which we already touched on basically, which is the soloable MSQ content outside of solo instances, which we already spoke about. So this would be, for example, trusts in dungeons and trials. Well, honestly, I don't think there is too much to talk about here. This is pretty straightforward. In my opinion, these were a good addition ever since Shadowbringers. I've always been a huge proponent of trusts because they enhance the narrative a lot more than if you were to do the dungeon with other players, because they can make the trust characters have dialogue as a reaction to things. The only thing I would say here is that I really wish they did more stuff, like for example the Don Meg dungeon, where you know you have that section where you walk across the beam and different characters resolve that section differently. For example, Tancred uses Shukuchi, Urianger teleports. Then you have poor Reen, who is just like slowly walking across it because she's scared of the heights and stuff like that. I wish there were more of those where they show like the personality of the trust, not just by the dialogue, but also like having these kind of like mechanics. I know the Endwalker dungeon did that. Ktisis, Hyperborea. You know, when with the first boss, you know, when it starts like hiding, the different characters.
Then Yustola, she just goes aura farming and she just walks straight up to the safe spots.
Yeah, or Riange again just teleports like a Chad, doesn't even bother walking. I love Alice because Alice just starts spamming. Like she just starts spamming all the like spots, just try to figure out where it is. And
yeah, I think baits you basically.
Yeah, and I think Estinians is the most badass because if I recall, he kind of like dives exactly where the guy is, but it doesn't lure him out. So it's like whatever, and he just backflips into the spot. It's like such a fucking dragoon thing to do. Oh man. So yeah, that's the only thing I would have to say with like the trusts implementation. I just wish there was more of that like gameplay element of like fleshing out the different personalities. I feel like there should be at least one such instance in every dungeon in the MSQ at least. Maybe that's just me being a demanding and entitled player, but that's how I feel. And of course, it's really cool that they began to make trials clearable with trusts since Endwalker. In fact, in my Vena video, you can see I posted my reaction because I was recording it when, you know, it was revealed, like, as you unlock the fight, that you can do it with trusts. And I have, like, such a PogChamp face. Like, oh my god, you can do it with trust.
Yeah.
That was pretty awesome. So we did notice in the, for example, Dawn Trail MSQ, in order to make it so you can clear the fights with trusts, they had to basically shoehorn like all the Scions into like, it's especially funny when you fight Zoralja and some of the Scions like Ustola just appear almost like out of nowhere. It's like, where did you even come from? It's like, oh well, it's time to show up for the boss fight, I guess. All in all, when we talk about these past implementations of solo content, I would actually argue that they've been mainly successful. Of course, there are some else. Like I said, in my opinion, the Blue Mage stuff didn't really, was kind of mid, you know, as people say these days. But the solo instances are pretty cool. I really enjoyed the duels. Maybe that's an unpopular opinion. Deep dungeon solos are really fun. Again, maybe I'm biased because I've done. I was gonna say all three, but I guess we have a fourth one now. I guess I need to do that at some point. And of course, trust. I love trust. So, what do you want from me? So I feel like if we look at FF14 already as it is, it already kind of has pretty decent solo content, right? If you really do think about it. It's just that they are kind of, how do you say, like spread out or like kind of randomly just assigned at times. There's not much consistency, right? I feel kind of like that. What do you think?
There's a term for this. It's called a content island, where basically they make something that's completely disconnected from the rest of the game, and the thing just kind of like ends up aging poorly because like it no longer, it just becomes like this time capsule, right? Time capsule of like old systems that got abandoned. That's kind of the way I look at the Carnival, for example. I mean, it's still the same mechanics. I mean, some of the mechanics you see again, but like generally, it is it becomes a content island, and like there's a lot of different philosophies when it comes to like content islands in video games. Is that some people say they're good, some people say they're bad. I personally don't like them because I prefer to be like a red line between the whole game, like where everything is connected to something, connects everything together. But the positive, I mean, that's a big topic on its own, right? Like that's a topic for its own almost in its own right. It's like, is content islands good or bad? The good thing about content islands is that it makes you more focused on development. Like it saves you a lot of resources when you're making it, because you don't have to like make sure everything is working in order in collaboration with everything else what's in the systems of the game. You just have to take what you already have, and then you just say, okay, we're gonna make this cool thing, this cool minigame-esque thing in the game, and that's gonna be the next patch.
I guess I have one more dimension I want to cover in regards to this topic. If solo content isn't the ideal for an MMO, then what is the ideal amount of players? This is kind of interesting because it should ideally be a number that if you have a raid, it feels kind of epic, like a group effort, like a raid. But I do feel like at some point it maybe becomes a bit too excessive, where you need to put in so much effort to gather everyone. Of course, it could make sense as like a one-time thing or like on occasion. That's why I don't mind things like chaotic. But if every single raid was 24 players, like even Savage Ultimates, I feel like that would be very exhausting. So, maybe the 8th is already kind of a sweet spot. Maybe. But I do know people who prefer the 4-man content. And for them, that feels more like the sweet
Oh
spot.
yeah, there's in World of Warcraft there's a whole subsection of people who only does 5-man content. They only do dungeons and nothing else.
Yeah, so this may be a bit may divide some opinions. I don't know, for me I do feel like maybe around 5 to 6 is kind of ideal. For me personally. But
yeah.
Again, then it is also like from the developer's point of view as well, the fewer players the better potentially, because it's easier to design. Again, potentially I'm not a developer so I can't say, but it just seems to me like common sense. In terms of common sense, that's how it will work. Because you have fewer interactions.
Yeah.
So I'd be curious to know what you guys think. Do you prefer 4-man or 8-man content? Yeah. And actually, first and foremost, what do you think about solo content? So I guess to conclude everything here, do we need solo content? I think especially for the MSQ, it is very nice. It is convenient. However, solo content, it does have the potential downside of making players too comfortable and not socialize enough. So that's why it's still nice to have content that rewards multiple players. At the same time, I would argue that there has been solid instances of solo content in FF14, like Palace of the Dead, like the duels, like solo instances, which I personally really enjoyed. But of course, also some misfires, like the Blue Mage stuff, for example, wasn't really for me at least. So to answer the question, do we need solo content? I would say yes, would be the overall answer from my part. Even though it seems a bit counterintuitive, you know, why solo content in an MMO. However, I think the solo content, especially when we had a look at the implementations of some previous pieces of solo content, like the duels, like Palace, it should ideally still be a system where it has some multiplayer element to it, rather than just purely solo. That would be the ideal. I also think there is merit to solo content in a sense that some people just prefer solo content, right? Like, you know, there is another game, RuneScape, which I know has a lot of solo bosses. And I know it's very popular in that game. And there are in fact bosses in that game that I don't know much about RuneScape, especially nowadays. But from what I understand, it has bosses that kind of just scale up to like almost infinity. You know, you can just increase how difficult the boss is. Though usually it is just numerical, so it just deals more damage. But that kind of a thing can be kind of interesting for a solo fight. So you can like kind of ramp it up. They've been trying to do something similar recently with F14. But yeah, so what's your conclusion, Velvet? Do we need solo content? And in regards to what we've spoken about so far, what's your overall conclusion?
No, I think I find myself agreeing with you. I think we do need solo content, but it needs to be like, so we need solo content in the sense that like it has to like serve the story majority of the time, is in my opinion. But I also do think that there is a place for solo content in like endgame, but it needs to like be connected with the rest of the game in some sense, in my opinion. It shouldn't be a content island, in my opinion.
For me, me personally, I'm actually not against like content island type of content, personally. But maybe that could be a discussion for another time, to be honest. That probably veers more into discussing like the relic content, right? So it's not really in the scope of this discussion, I feel.
Yeah, it's also like it's a very big topic because like a lot of things in FF14 in general has become content islands as a whole in their own right, but they all became content islands different ways.
I mean, there is literally a content island in 14 with the island sanctuary.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
That's pretty funny. So as a conclusion for the solo content, I think some of it is awesome, some of it not so awesome. It definitely helps the narrative, but as far as endgame content, it has to be done very carefully and thought out, and not just haphazardly. So that's been our thoughts on solo content this day. And thanks for watching, and have a nice day.